Hey, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining me today, Sunday, May 3rd, for another live stream. Today, let's turn that down. And anyway, yeah, so today what I'm going to be doing is just sketching. I really feel like it's a good time to do a new Trump. I haven't done one in a while. I did one for the last election, and I have one that's like 10 or 12 years old before that. But yeah, he's probably the person you should probably draw most and have most in your portfolio because he's got such a great face and he's always in the news. So I'm going to explore a lot of different exaggeration choices today. I'm going to be pushing exaggerations, doing a lot of thumbnail sketching. I definitely won't get to like a finished sketch today. Today's more about exploring exaggeration concepts, learning how to be bold in your exaggeration choices and not repeating the same mistakes over and over again. So there's going to be a lot of trial and error, which is just it's the backstage part of the artistic process, and it's what we all have to go through. And I want to show you some of my process when I'm really invested in a project and want to get the best possible exaggeration, the funniest drawing, the best likeness, and I'll take you through some of those steps. Alrighty here. Oh, do you like the new intro background? Yeah, I figured I needed a little buffer to start the podcast, the live stream. Hey, Kasim and Antonio. Hey, Alfred, good to see you. Permanent one, hey, doing good. And Kees, welcome from Holland. Thanks for joining. Patrick from Italy. A traditional Italian name, Patrick. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started, and you guys feel free to chime in with comments, and I'll try to take questions as I'm going, of course. Hey, Dimrold, welcome. Oh, you may also have noticed I got I put the live chat feed in my window this time because my last video I did last Sunday, because of a couple YouTube quirks, the live chat is not able to be replayed with that particular video. So the chat is, it's just gone or it's hidden. So in case that happens again, at least we'll have the on-screen chat window updates. Anyway, I wanted to show you let's just see what I've done over the past. Here's my oldest Trump that I've done. And this was, probably like 2009 or something when he was on The Apprentice. I don't know. And it's, served me well. It's a decent likeness and exaggeration. Very Toad-like or Troll-like, I don't know. But definitely needs an update. Then during I think I released this on the day of the election. It was just sort of like an election caricature. It was, face off. Who will win? At this point I didn't know who was going to win. So try to capture both of their unique characters and put them in sort of a showdown setting, sort of like an old boxing poster, like a head-to-head sort of concept. And I had some fun with this, playing with the graphics, creating these graphics, looking around for inspiration, and I kind of enjoy that part, putting something really realistic with something graphical elements that aren't really illustrative. Just it's a nice change for me. Then here was one. This is probably my favorite one I've done. I did this during the Proco course as well, I think, as one of the lessons. And it was just more or less a completed drawing, a completed sketch. And I think this one really captured his persona as I see it. Sort of an attitude and hunched over quality of it. I like the masses and how the weight is distributed everywhere. And this is something I could have definitely turned into a painting. I still could. But I wanted to do something new for today. Hey, welcome other new people. Red Jones. Always good to see how a caricature develops, in particular from the early stages. Yeah, that's the key to the whole thing. That is the problem that most people have with caricature and starting a new caricature, if you're not as experienced, is where do you start? What choices do you make? How do you get from point A to point Z? And the first few steps are the most critical, I think, because of that issue of the decision making. In caricature, the most successful caricatures are the ones that make the bold decisions, the unique decisions. And if you can manage to get a hilarious sketch, a funny exaggeration with like a top-notch likeness, that's the ultimate goal. And me, myself, I'm not a huge exaggerator. I discovered that about myself over the years. Initially, I tried to be like Kruger. You know, everyone wants to be like Kruger when they first start out. And Kruger's not even Kruger anymore. I mean, he doesn't do those kinds of exaggerations. I guess he got tired of them. But, you know, I didn't, I felt I was more actually, after I got over the initial attraction to Kruger and that style of exaggeration, you know, when he was doing the height of his work in the 90s, I kind of discovered I leveled off and figured out I'm actually more of a, I don't know what you might call it, just middle of the road exaggeration guy. That's what I really like to see when someone, you know, I don't need to see faces stretched to the length of to be like a telephone pole shaped head and I have to decipher, you know, like a puzzle, like who is that? Oh, I can kind of see, oh, it's that person. Okay, yeah, you're right. I can definitely see it in there now. Because the more extreme exaggerations are immensely entertaining and fun to look at, but if they do need deciphering or you have to figure out who it is, like a puzzle, it's not as successful to me. To me, a caricature should have an instantly recognizable likeness, and also just have good structure and anatomy and perspective, which I've talked about in past videos. Let's see, Heimdall, big fan from Barcelona. Hey, thanks for joining. I was surprised you didn't like the Series 7 brushes. They worked amazingly for me for 15 years. Yeah, you know, when I did my inking demo a couple weeks ago, I talked about the Series 7 Winsor Newton inking brushes, and for me, they just ended up splaying. Maybe I didn't take good care of them, I don't know, but they didn't maintain a good point, and even when I dip them in ink, they start to spread out, and they don't give me a very good line. They give a cool, hairy, sketchy effect, but they don't hold a lot of ink. So actually I have this other cheaper brush that I like a lot better that gets me great results. Hello, Sergio. Hello, Permanent again. And Butch Curry. He always wanted to be Mort Drucker. Yeah. Mort was my first introduction, really, to the world of caricature with Mad Magazine. So, yeah, it's I always like that style as well. Hey, Bruce. Welcome from New York. I have some amazing Trump caricatures. Thank you. So anyway, oh yeah, there's one other thing I wanted to show. This was actually a graphic I did for the Proco course. Because I think we needed a drop shadow or something for the Trump to make it look three-dimensional. So I created this, sort of based off my drawing, and it's just a silhouette. But you can tell who it is instantly, I hope. And that's, you know, it's reminiscent of the old Alfred Hitchcock, you know, film logo where you'd have just a silhouette of himself and you could tell who it was supposed to be. And this is an example of a caricature that has recognizability, but not an actual likeness. I think Tom Richmond talks a little bit about that in his book on caricature, where you can definitely have a caricature of someone where you recognize who it is, who it's supposed to be, who it's intended to be, without actually drawing any features, or maybe they're so abstract that there's not really an actual likeness if you were to like compare it up against a photo, but just by looking at it, because the person is so iconic and the silhouette captures those iconic features, those iconic shapes, you can tell who it's supposed to be. And that is a skill. That's something that is good to be able to do a caricature without likeness, but with a recognizability factor. But it's not what I'm after. I want a true likeness where you actually look at the eyes and the eyebrows and the shapes of the cheeks and the jowls, and it's all together, it all comes together. But it does indicate how you can get away with just the fewest simple strokes to get your message across. It doesn't always have to be about rendering and likeness. As long as you make the big decisions correctly in a sample like this, where there's literally nothing to look at other than the silhouette, then that's still a success. That's a good thing. All right, so let's go ahead and get these out of here. Let's start a new picture here. And I have collected a ton of reference photos of Mr. Trump. Let's see if I can find my favorite ones. So I got let's see, a few of them here. I always try to find photos that have not only show a good likeness, but also have an interesting angle and good strong light and shadows. And of course, with him, facial expressions, it's all about the facial expressions. So I'll just grab a few of these and start with, and I'm just going to draw from several different photos, I think, over the stream here. I'm trying to use photos that I haven't chosen before, or that I haven't done a caricature from before. I'm going to start with just these first few here. Kent Nelson, hey, good afternoon. Are you planning an additional portrait or caricature course in addition to Proco? Not necessarily portrait or caricature, but I am in talks. We're actually talking about what I might do next for Proco. Can't say any more than that, but yeah, stay tuned. Oh, I got a corrupted image there. I can't open that. Wonder which one that was. Anyway, that should be fine. I got enough to work from. Okay, let's shrink some of these down here. Figure out which one I want to work from. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with this. This is a very Trumpian type image here, I think. He's got the sort of open mouth duck lips. I'm not sure what you might call that. Alrighty. Oh, there it is. Gotta get my trusty Cintiq glove. Okay, so let's just start playing with shapes, see what we can do. So I'm just kind of just going off of my feeling right now, like what I see when I look at him, and right now I see a, I guess, what is that, a trapezoid shape, I guess? The heavy neck. John asks, do I prefer doing commissioned art or teaching others? I like both. When I was younger, I never thought I'd get into teaching at all, but it just sort of happened, and I did it more and more just because people asked me to, and I do like it a lot. But yeah, I love doing commissioned work. I love figuring out a problem, whether it's caricature or portrait, like how I'm going to make this a beautiful, attractive piece that someone's going to want to hang in their home. It's a big challenge to me, and I just love painting. I love rendering. I love figuring out a likeness. Heimdall asks, do you find male faces easier to caricature than women, vice versa, or is it all down to each individual face? Yeah, it is down to each individual face. There are women who are easier to caricature than men based on their likeness, and there are certainly, I think there are more men that are easier to caricature than women. I don't know why that is. Maybe because I'm a guy and I have maybe there's a hang up about making a woman look too goofy or something. I don't know. It is maybe a little bit psychological, but I mean, physically, women do have generally, a young, attractive female type. Most of the celebrities we see have a certain look where they fit into a narrow range of what we perceive of as beauty. So they're all very similar in certain respects, and they don't have a lot of facial baggage. There's not a lot of bags or wrinkles or distinctive characteristics or overgrown chins, for instance. So yeah, I mean, I think it is because of our cultural bias about what we put up on the, what we elevate to consider beautiful and put them on the screen and put them in the news. It is, I think, a little harder to caricature women because the women that we see in public are less caricaturable, if that makes sense. I think our math should be good for the initial design. Face proportions, I mean, it's always been difficult for me. I'm not sure I understand, but yeah. Anyway, let's go ahead and continue drawing here. And remember, this is just more of a thumbnail sketch. I'm just trying to figure things out, to figure out which direction I want to go in with the exaggeration. So it's going to be very scratchy, very loose. Just figuring things out. Pursing out those lips even further. So I'm trying not to only, exaggerate the features and the proportions, but also trying to exaggerate the expression. If a subject is making a really extreme expression like this, the expression itself can be pushed. You can push the amount that the feature moves or changes or distorts. So really wide face here. I'm not sure if it's going to work out, but I'm just going to try to stick with my initial design here. And just the flattest top of the head ever. Just because of his hairstyle, I think, really works out well to give it that flat baseball lip, you know, the brim of a baseball bat coming out in front of his forehead. His eyebrows popping off his head as well. John asked, do I think it's a good idea to work in black and white initially and not have to worry about color? Yeah, definitely. When you're trying to figure out all this other stuff, like likeness, exaggeration choices, and proportions and perspective, don't throw color into the mix. There's no need to. Take it one step at a time. Do, for lack of a better word, baby steps. You don't want to have to juggle all those variables and decisions too early on, because it'll dilute your efforts. Unless maybe that's the way you work. Every artist is different and individual, and heck, maybe if you sketch better in color, go for it. But I would say that's probably not the norm. Little tiny, tiny squinty eyes. Patrick asks, who like me has purchased the course now, does not have the possibility of feedback of the drawings? Yeah, unfortunately, if you're talking about the Proco course, that's, we just, when the initial course comes out, that's when we are in production mode and actually do film student critiques. And after that, you can still watch other students' critiques and get a lot out of that, I think, because most artists going through the course struggle with a lot of the same issues. So if you watch other people's critiques, chances are you're going to run across a lot of the things you have issues with, and you'll be able to relate to the problems and hear the solutions. Or my solutions, I guess I should say, not the solutions. Because in caricature, there's never just one answer to anything. It's not like an anatomy course where, there's only one way to draw that skull, and if you don't draw it that way, it's wrong. Dimrold asks, have I heard of the Doki Wear CGI glove for artists? No. I'll look it up, though, later. I've got this one that seems to work pretty well. Keeps my hand from sticking to the screen. Okay, so whoops, didn't mean to stretch that. Still not used to the new Photoshop, how you used to have to hold down Shift when you're resizing things so that the proportions would maintain their proportions. But now if you hold down Shift, it does the exact opposite. It actually allows you to free transform. Still haven't gotten used to that. Okay, let's try the same sketch here, the same photo. Just let's try to figure out some other different way to exaggerate it. And this is where I tend to have my weakest point. Whenever I draw from the same photo over and over again, I often repeat the same tendencies or the same shapes. And it's hard to break out of that because my initial decision, I think, was probably more me. It was an instant reaction to what I saw. And it's a reflection of how I feel about the subject. And to divert from that is to maybe be less true to my original intentions. But it's a necessary step if you want to break out of your current habits, because that is a current habit to maybe draw a face that way. If you see what I mean, you got to figure out how to draw the same person, the same photo in different ways if you really want to be a better exaggerator. And that might mean just going in a completely opposite direction from what you went in before. So maybe now, maybe I'll do a tall, long face and see how that works. And a real stubby neck. And there are certain traits on a person that you have to get in there or it's not going to be them. Such as, how his hair is styled or how his eyes are squinty and small with heavy bags. Things like that aren't going to change, but how I draw those things in relationship to each other can change and can still look like the person if it's done well. But my initial reaction to this photo was not to give him a tall, long face. That to me seems kind of like a mistake, but I just want to see what will happen if I do it or if I attempt it. And every now and then you do surprise yourself. You think, oh, that does work. Alfred says, I still struggle, but I keep trying. And that's it, Alfred. Yeah, I know you're one of the hardest working people ever to go through the course. You're always sketching and always trying to improve yourself. And that is the key to success, is just staying on top of yourself and staying disciplined and keeping at it. And there's no substitute for hard work. I mean, I'll take someone who works hard over someone who has any kind of natural gifts. I don't actually really believe in natural gifts or talents. That to me is a myth, I think, created by people who don't practice a skill. And they don't want to, accept the fact that, it's just hard work and they weren't willing to do the work. Some people just throw their hands up and say, oh, I don't know how you do that. You're just naturally gifted. It drives me nuts to hear that. I hate the word talent. To me, that's a bad word. That's a 4-letter word. Whenever someone says talent, what they mean is skill. And a skill is something that you develop through lots and lots of practice. Do I ever use Procreate and iPad to draw? I have them on my iPad Pro, but not a lot, no. I do sometimes bring it with me if I'm going on a trip or going to be in a waiting room or something. And yeah, I'll do a little sketch here or there, but it's not something I do very much or very seriously, I like it just fine, but it's more just due to my own habits. I don't tend to really just sketch out in public, and that's what an iPad's good for, is sketching on the go. I just usually want to do my errand and get home, and I don't sit in coffee shops and sketch. And if I'm at home and I want to sketch, I'll do it on paper in my sketchbook or on my Cintiq. And I'm mostly home all the time, so I just end up defaulting to my PC setup with my Cintiq. I tend to give Trump a short nose because, I usually squish his face down. But let's see what happens if I give him a longer nose. But let's try really, really tiny mouth on this one. That's maybe even like, let's push that mouth out really far in front of his facial plane. Breaking the bonds of good reality or good sensibility. He does have the chubby face, though, so maybe that. Yeah. So I don't think the the lips are now not out in front of the face anymore. Although maybe I could reposition them after I get the face drawn in here. No, big chin. Big chin does not work on Trump. Let's give that tiny chin. Yeah, I'm adapting it as I see it here. I wanted to draw that initial long face shape, but I could just tell right away that wasn't going to work. And that's what the stage is about. It's about experimenting and trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. Let's push that mouth out even further again. Because I like this concept. I think it's pretty funny to have that little duck mouth way out in front of his face. Get tiny, tiny, tiny eyes. Big bags. And just because of the nose and the exaggeration I chose to do here, I think we're gonna have to lose that eye on the other side. We're not gonna be able to really see as much of it. That's all right though. sometimes during these rough thumbnail sketches, I'll block in a real simple value rather than resolving anything. You know, I'm not going to say draw the nostrils, especially in a well-lit photo where there are strong shadows. It's very helpful to help bring out the forms, to figure out where the forms are, and just represent them with a real simple wash of tone. You know what I can do, now that I'm looking at it, let's extend that neck even further. I did a quick sketch of Trump last week too, where I extended the neck, you know, and heightened that sort of toad-like quality underneath the chin. Yeah, let's go even bigger. And that's where I can get my length back, I think, as far as redistributing the mass of the face. Just go wacky with the proportion here. Yeah, you know, it's okay. It's not definitely not my favorite, but I'm going to move on, I think, because that's not quite as successful as I would hope. So I'm going to just make that one go away there. Let's see. Red asks, the deviations from the average that I remember you saying in your Proco piece about exaggeration. Is there a question there, or did you? I'm not sure if that's a question. Yeah, so let me know what you mean, Red, by that when you say that. Heimdall asks, do you find doing caricatures from real life much harder than from a picture? For me, a 2D picture makes it easier to read the basic shapes. I mean, I started by doing live caricature, theme parks and parties, and I still do that. For the quick sketch, I really do prefer to do them from life. You know, those are when I'm doing just marker style drawings with no pre-sketch. It's just a straight on view usually, or a slight 3/4 view, and I do them in about 3 minutes, 5 minutes. I think they always turn out best when they're from life. When I'm working from a photo and trying to capture that live quick sketch quality, it definitely is easier to work from life. But yeah, from when I'm doing studio pieces or work like this, yeah, I like to invest the time, and I have to have a photo, I think, because the model's not going to hold a pose like that for any length of time. And also, Dimmeralt asks, is it fine to use any suitable shape for the head, or do you have to find the right one in the reference photo every time? I think just about any shape head could work for anybody. I think a skilled caricaturist could make it work. I mean, I could, you know, not me personally, I don't know, because I'm not, again, this is not my bag, but if I were to do a head shape like this, or a head shape like this, or head shape like this, I mean, these could all be Trump in the right hands. You could figure it out. Maybe some would be more successful than the others. And it's not my natural inclination to go with shapes like this, but it definitely can be done. Head shape isn't the most important thing, but it does help. It makes it easier if you get a good suitable head shape. It's a tricky answer. There's a lot of answers for it. There's a lot of ways you can figure out a caricature. It doesn't, like I said, there's never just one right answer. But if you put the features on these shapes in the right places, in the right proportions, there's a good chance you will make it look, you know, like Trump. You know, I don't know if it's an answer like that here. I mean, this isn't one of my thumbnail sketches here. I'm just trying to make a point. So, you know, you could figure it out, is what I'm saying. You can definitely work with just about any shape. You could maybe even give yourself the exercise of just blindly drawing random shapes on a paper, or asking a child or someone else to give you some random blobs. You know, just a closed shape of any size, any proportion, and try to make that into a caricature of a famous person or whoever your subject is. And that might be an interesting exercise to see how that concept works. But I've seen so many varieties of caricatures over the years, different approaches to solving caricature problems, that I believe anything is possible in caricature. So no, it's not, the head shape isn't absolutely critical. You don't always have to conform to any preconception. Minji, sorry, I'm butchering your name. What is the most important feature to create a likeness? There is never one answer. It's different for everybody, and it's never just one feature. It's always how the features interrelate with each other and the decisions that you make over multiple steps. So, no one right answer to that. Anyway, let's try it from a different photo here. That's too similar. That's also a 3/4. These are all 3/4 views. Yeah, let's do this one just because it's a facing the other way. All right. Yeah, let's try something. Well, this is, I guess, sort of the next level of extreme for what I did on the previous one. It's the same angle, just in reverse. Different expression. And I like the different subtle expressions, too. It doesn't always have to be a big, bombastic expression. Like he's just giving this sort of peering, leering look off to the side, kind of suspicious looking. And it's definitely a challenge to capture that as well. You know, just because someone is known for their big bombastic expressions doesn't mean you always have to do that. A Trump hexagon, yeah. A Trumpagon. I'm gonna try to see what I really need to do is warm up here. I'm kind of cold. The first sketch is always a little stiff. And I find I do sketch better the more that I do it. It's just like, working out in the morning. You just gotta warm up. Gotta have a warm up period. And the more that I do these little quickie thumbnail sketches, the looser I get. My pen just kind of more dances across the page. And I like that style of sketching. When I see my own sketches have the quality where it looks like I didn't lift my pen from the screen once while I was drawing. Just the pen just constantly travels and moves. I think that's I don't know, I just like that look. Because I feel like the more your pen just constantly moves and you don't think about it, it's more of a reflection of your unconscious reaction to the person. And at this stage, this is kind of what you want in a thumbnail sketch, is you want to have a true, honest, visceral reaction to the face. And then you'll figure out how to make it work later. But the initial choices have to come from a place of like honesty and purity from what your artistic soul is telling you to do. Thank God for this hair. I love this hair. So fun to draw. I don't know why I'm inspired to just do a little body on this one. I was going to make a little caricature checklist before I got started. That's one of the lessons in my Proco course, was how to organize your thoughts and think about the features you want to hit on and exaggerate in the sketch. I didn't, but I can just sort of mentally or just verbally kind of go over what I was thinking of adding to that list. And some of it is about the body too. And in Trump's case, he always he's a very large person. However, I think it's just really funny to give him this sort of like panda bear shaped body where it's just very cute and stubby, with an oversized baggy suit that's a little frumpled and wrinkled, and of course a tie that just is way too long. He wears his ties way too long. Come on, you gotta shorten that tie, dude. I think it's a subtle psychological game. He's trying to give a suggestion about something with the length of his tie. Just a personal opinion. I don't know. And anyway, as far as the face goes, to me, he has squared off, strong, blocky nose. It's not, I mean, it is a kind of a big nose, but it doesn't take up a huge amount of his face, but it definitely has a strong presence on his face. And it has a sort of a squared off ball. Small squinty eyes, heavy bags, very hairy eyebrows that just kind of jump off of his face. In some lighting, his eyebrows look really light. In this particular photo, I think just because of the lighting, his eyebrows look really dark. So if I were to paint him, I might actually do, if I was doing colors and values, I would be doing probably lighter eyebrows. But in this particular photo, his eyebrows look dark. But yeah, wide face, heavy jowls, heavy neck. And of course, a mouth that is very expressive. Overall, I think the mouth is small on his face. I think it's a mistake to give him a large mouth. Even in an expression like this, just because he is so fond of making his mouth into this tiny little hole, I think he just has the appearance, or I think it just makes more sense to always give him a small mouth. To have him, even when he grins, it shouldn't be a big giant grin taking up a large portion of his face, because there are the idea of relativity you need to take into account. If you give someone, say, if you want someone to look and have like a big, heavy set face, if you give them large features, it's going to diminish the size of the face by comparison. So if you give someone tiny features, it makes their face look even larger and wider by comparison. It's all about relativity. And that's one of the key things to exaggeration is how do the features relate to each other on the face in your subject, and how can I make those relationships even more pronounced, more exaggerated. Let's see, someone asks, Itai Cohen, or Itai says, hey Cord, are you planning to do a live stream on live event caricatures? You mentioned at the Proco course that the key is to throw yourself into the party, but never show to practice. Did I? I mean, I didn't really advocate doing live quick sketch caricatures. I just don't think I did. Maybe I did, and maybe I mentioned it once or twice. I mean, it is good training. It's good experience to just get out there and draw live. Yeah, it's not this kind of drawing, so it's a different beast altogether, and those skills definitely don't always translate. But it does help get you into the mood of figuring out what it takes to be a caricaturist and to exaggerate. Especially if you're working with other really good artists who are experienced and do funny sketches. You learn more about the mental attitude about being a caricaturist, and it's definitely like puts you through the gauntlet, and you have to get good fast, at least at that style of caricature drawing. And more than anything, I think the live caricature experience sparked an interest in the art form, and made me want to delve into it further when I started to see people like Kruger who were doing lots of other things with it that I had never seen before. It was a real eye-opener to see those kinds of drawings. And figured, oh my God, you could do this with caricature? I had no idea. And you can make them realistic and paint them? Wow. So, yeah, so it's one aspect, but it's not a road you definitely have to go down if you want to be a caricaturist. There are plenty of successful, awesome caricature artists who do illustration and paintings who never did quick sketch. It's just the road I went down. And a lot of people I know who did that did turn out to be really good artists in general. Antonio asks, do I do the force method in caricature art? I've heard of that. I think Stan did a video talking about force drawing, or drawing the force in a character, in a drawing. And I don't immediately remember what that referred to exactly. I thought it had something to do with just drawing the motion into the gesture of the pose when you're drawing, say, a figure in action. I could be getting that wrong. If that's the case, I mean, thumbnail sketches are basically, like what I'm doing here, are gesture sketches, but just for the purpose of caricaturing a likeness and not necessarily to find motion. I don't know if that answers your question. Red says, I haven't tried doing a checklist for a caricature before. I'll try to do that, yeah. I'm currently trying to complete a caricature of the late actor Kurt Jurgens, and it's been challenging. Yeah, it'll help organize your thoughts. Check out the checklist video, the lesson in the Proco YouTube page. There's a whole caricature playlist with all my particular lesson videos in order. And it's technically in part 2 of the course, the more advanced section. But it's just about, go over that process, go over that video, and if you haven't already. Okay, that's pretty funny. I kind of like the weight distribution there. Definitely captures that look, a certain posture. I'm going to keep that one, I think, here. Let's shrink him down there. And see, that one's like almost a profile. Let's try something a little different. I'm gonna go back to my reference photos here, find something a little different to work from. Here's one that's pretty good. I like that expression, and it's more of a front view. And yeah, here's another one that's sort of from the front with great lighting. Oh, maybe it doesn't. Oh, that's the one it won't let me open, I guess. Oh well, I'll just work from this one and see what happens. So this one will be a little more challenging because he's not making a super Trumpian expression. I mean, he does have the little pursed lips, but his eyes are more wide open. And it's not that squinty look that I like to do when I'm caricaturing him, but that's good. It'll be a different take. It'll be a different challenge. Kasim asks, were you inspired by the dog's face for Trump's caricature? No, not really. I mean, I wasn't thinking of that. But if that helps you, by all means. That, again, was another Proco lesson, was the finding the subject's spirit animal, or the animal or object that makes you think of that person. You know, if the person looks like a pug dog or any other kind of animal or an object, draw that object first and then try to fit the subject's face into those types of proportions. Okay, so this one, the weight of his head is distributed a little bit differently. And I'm going to let that inform my decision. I don't want to just go with the same kind of proportions I've been exploring here. So definitely more of like a square shape, I guess. And still, I think the back of his head can be really short because his collar comes up pretty high. And his neck, pretty thick. He doesn't really have any discernible neck in this picture, it just sinks into his shoulders. Maybe the hair will take up more of a presence on his face here because his head is tilted down and we can see more of the top of his head. Still got that duck bill or that baseball brim shape in front though that I can still see. I'm going to exaggerate the expression a little bit. He's got sort of an angry look. His eyebrows don't, in reality, dip down really far in this photo, but I'm reading the expression as anger. And to convey anger, you know, the eyebrows have to be drawn together and downward in the middle. I mean, he's not overly angry. He's not like crazy angry, but it's that sort of serious, you know, sort of in between seriousness and anger expression. And even those eyes are open, I'm going to keep them small just because, you know, I think that works best for his likeness. If I were to give him giant puppy dog eyes, it just would not be Trump. Nose here, I think we can do a longer nose than what we've been given him in the past. The nose is really long in this particular angle maybe because his head's down, not tilted back. But the more I want to try to remember, I got to do these like scribbly, free, loose lines because that's what's going to help me stay loose and stay spontaneous in my sketch and not get too stiff. If I think about construction too much and perspective and all these things, it's going to tighten me up and it's going to make me draw a little bit more stiff. And this stage should be about looseness and exploration. Let's make a little bit more of a definitive statement over here, though, on the side of the face. It's a little too scratchy. make that little mouth thing that he does, I find it's always helpful to do a little oval shape first, and then you can add the corners of the mouth after that. It'll help you place it, I think, in space correctly as well. When you think of it as just, in its simplest constituent shape. And make sure you got to make that connection with the philtrum to the nose, otherwise it won't be a successful rendering of that expression. Same thing down here. I think you got to push the the shape underneath, the shadow shape underneath the lips to make it work. Let's see. Hey, hello, Shiny. Thanks for joining us again. Doing it an hour later, so hopefully you didn't have to get up so early in New Zealand. Let's see. Thanks for the other tutorial. The Riley was super helpful. Awesome. Thanks. Was it you that talked about finding your spirit animal for getting a likeness? Yeah, I was just mentioning it. I don't know if you're just joining us, but I mentioned it just a few minutes ago. Yeah, that was one of my lessons in the Proco course, was searching for your subject's spirit animal, or animal that sort of represents them. And it doesn't have to be an animal. Like I said, I did a Clint Eastwood spirit animal drawing, and his spirit animal was a gun, was a big revolver, just because of his association with, Dirty Harry. It doesn't always have to be a pure physical resemblance. It could be something that just inspires you about the person and you want to make it work. So I made his head more elongated and shaped like the barrel of a gun. Yeah, that's it's a fun technique, but it's usually not what I rely on for my go-to when I'm sketching. It's just something that I do when I'm bored or frustrated and want to try a new take on somebody. Maybe I'll find a spirit animal. Like if you run out of all the other ideas about how to find an exaggeration on someone, the spirit animal is just sort of something to push you in a different direction than you might have otherwise thought about. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. He has a really sort of mountainous mass here with the shoulders and the head coming up to this point here. And it's not the best likeness. I think it could be improved. But let me, I'm going to try this one more time, just because I can. Let's try a different take. Keep this here so I can still see it. Yeah, let's try something different here. This is about exploring and taking risks, and let's see where else I can go with this here. Yeah, so let's see. I mean, this isn't really a caricature of a caricature exercise, but what if I were to take that idea from the last sketch and just do it a little bit more extreme? Just really sink that head down into those shoulders, make the face even wider. Yeah, thanks, Bruce, for the comment. Yeah, it's all about sketching like this. I mean, this is the core of it. I mean, there are all these fancy exercises you can do, like spirit animal sketching, making a checklist, opposition sketching, all these things you can use to trick your brain to seeing things in a new way. That's what all those exercises are about. But they're not the core of it. The core of caricature is just putting pencil to paper or stylus to screen and just figuring it out, just doing the math. This is like doing the work. This is the pick and shovel work, as my old teacher Jeff Watts used to say. It's just about doing the hours, getting the mileage in. There's no substitute or shortcut for that. Jim says, when I'm trying to do a caricature, I often end up drawing a straightforward portrait based on the reference. Do you have any tips for keeping in caricature mode? Yeah, I mean, other people can chime in with their opinions too to answer Jim's question, but I would just say look at those other exercises I mentioned in part 2 of my caricature course, because they are about helping you get out of your normal comfort zone and safe zone, which usually ends up being more portraity. In general, try not to look at your subject as much. In fact, that is another exercise from the course, was doing memory sketches, doing memory caricatures, where you spend like 15 seconds or even 5 seconds looking at your subject, studying it, not drawing, just looking, studying it, figuring out all what you want to do in your head. Then you put the photo reference away, you don't look at it at all, and just do a caricature purely from memory. And when you draw more from memory, you're going to draw more caricatured, because that's how our brains work. We remember likenesses in a way that caricaturists do. Even people that don't draw caricatures, we're always, I think, we're comparing our subject to the average and figuring out how they differ from that average. So if you want to recognize someone's likeness, you're looking for a familiar face in a crowd, you're looking for those features on a person's face which are different from the norm, if that makes sense. So I think caricatures just take advantage of the natural way that our brains tend to remember likenesses, but we just consciously push those differences even more to make them more obvious. And when you do memory sketching, when you don't look at the photo reference as much, you're naturally more inclined to draw more exaggerations. At least that's my opinion. I mean, a lot of memory sketches that you do, if you do that exercise, you're gonna fail. It'll look terrible. It won't look like the person. You're gonna forget a lot. But the more that you do it, the better you'll get at it. And then when you're actually doing your work in a normal method where you have a couple pictures of your subject and you're trying to draw them, you will naturally, the more experienced you get, you'll naturally just avoid looking at the photo as much. You'll just draw more from your memory what you think that person looks like, rather than drawing straight from the photo. The more you look at the photo, I think the more portraity you're in danger of drawing. So hopefully that makes sense. It's a long answer for a simple question, but Butch says, suggests starting with the head shape that's not skull-shaped. Yeah, so like what I'm trying to do here is getting away from the skull. Like, where is it? When you draw initial head shape, don't draw that. Just don't draw this almost perfectly oval, spherical shape. It's a Proco skull, by the way. Just the initial head shape will determine everything. So if you're like me and you draw the head shape first, just don't draw a human head shape and you will naturally not get a portrait-y type drawing. Yeah, I think this one's turning out a little more successfully than the one I did right before this, where I was sticking a little too close to the photo. And that's what's happening. I'm getting warmed up now. I'm getting a little braver in my decisions here. So yeah, caricature doesn't just automatically happen as soon as you sit down at your desk with the intention of caricaturing. It's kind of like you're not going to be able to run that marathon until you've had a lot of practice running, for long distances, and you've stretched out and you're warmed up. It's the same kind of idea. JDK asks, in regards to Jim's comment about caricature mode, any thoughts on someone like Rockwell's work? His faces and figures seem so exaggerated, but also realistic and structurally sound. Yeah, definitely. I've always said, back in my days in college, I did an oral report on Norman Rockwell and how he actually changed the subjects from the photo reference and caricatured his subjects quite a bit. Well, not quite a bit, not like us, or not like what I'm doing here, but he definitely did subtle caricatures. Definitely. You look at his work, so much of it is definitely caricatured. Especially in his earlier days, I think he had more fun. And then he actually tightened up and did a lot more realism, like really, I wouldn't say stiff, but definitely more realistic proportions the older he got. But in the early days, yeah, like you look at his little kids, in the swimming holes and, with their elongated necks and giant ears and buck teeth. Yeah, he was caricaturing. But just, on the spectrum of caricature, from 0 to 100, he might have been exaggerating like 5%, 10% at the max, maybe. So anyway, yeah. And that's also why he was so structurally sound, because he didn't exaggerate, I think, a lot. And he was an excellent draftsman and knew his anatomy. And so even though he caricatured a little bit, he can definitely make them. They felt very realistic. I think he fooled people into thinking he was doing pure realistic portraits of people when he really wasn't, just because his anatomy and structure was so good. Any thoughts on how to find this balance? It's something you have to, I think, sit down and intend to do. You want to say, hey, I'm going to do a Rockwell-style caricature where something's exaggerated only 5%, or today I'm going to try to draw like Kruger and do 80% exaggerations, 90%. It just depends on your skill level, where you're at, and what your intentions are. Alrighty, let me shrink this little guy down here. So there you go, two very different takes on the same subject here, left and right. And both have elements of Trump in them. I wouldn't say either has a great likeness, but if I squint down, I can definitely see Trump in there, and I can see, I can definitely refine that, especially the one here in the middle. I could refine that into a more finished likeness that looks more like him. I really like the shapes on this one here in the lower left. That's pretty funny. In fact, I would like to take one of these into the rough sketch phase. Let's see if there's any other photos, though, that I might want to work from before moving on. Let's see. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, I like that. It's not very Trumpian, but it's definitely there. There's good likeness in that photo, and it's a good lighting. Let's see. I really like this one too. This might be an interesting challenge. It's still an extreme 3/4 view, which is mostly what I've done today, but I like the subtlety of the expression, and it's not overly exaggerated, but it captures some innate quality about him. So I think I'm going to work from that one. I'm going to try this, and if this doesn't work out, I'm going to take one of my earlier thumbnail sketches here and make one of those into a more finished drawing. But let's get these off screen just so I have a little more room to work here. Okay. Shiny says that side full body version of Trump is so cute. He really has a pleasing rhythms. Actually, I think it's important when drawing someone hideous or unlikable. Yeah, up the cute factor to make it palatable. Yeah, That's definitely one take. Because it kind of, if you want to take the air out of somebody or, take them down a notch, it's always great to make them less serious. You want to, you diminish their importance, I think, by the more you ridicule them, I guess. I mean, that's, a lot of what caricature is about. But it's not always, sometimes you roast the ones you love, too. It's not always about hatred or animosity towards the person. In fact, I love most of the subjects that I choose to draw. I'm very big fans. I love Christopher Walken, and he's one of my favorite people to draw and to caricature, and I try to find new ways to caricature him, not because I dislike him or I want to make fun of him, but just because he has a great face. But yeah, just to make him sort of, chibi or cute or something like that, I think just, or giving him toddler proportions really diminishes that sense of self-importance that he might have. It's all about making your own personal statement about the subject, whether you like them or dislike them, and there's different ways to to go about that. Okay, so let's see. What strikes me about this is just how square it is, squared off. So definitely try to maintain this kind of thing. I did that with the body sketch, I think, as well. I kept him within a really square head shape. But the goal here is to try to figure out how to do that a little differently without repeating the exact same exaggeration choices. And I might end up doing something very, very similar. So that's one of the things. It is hard to break habits and to see someone in a totally different way than what you mentally see them as already. But this is the trick about caricaturing and trying to come up with different shapes, is you just got to do this kind of work to figure these problems out on your own, on paper. You just got to do it and see what happens. Let's go really, really tiny with the eyes. I mean, I did definitely touch on that in many of these, but I mean, to draw them just so small and scrunched up on the face, I think would be pretty funny. Okay, so these eyes and the mouth especially are going to get just terribly diminutive, really small. But you know what? Need to push that out a little further, I think. And this one looks like he's almost doing blue steel look. If you know what I'm talking about. Hey, Dimrolt, thanks for joining us. Yeah, hopefully we can catch the end of the stream later when you have more time. Shiny says, faces are so fascinating. Getting the chance to see a new face you've never seen before is exciting. I suppose normal non-artist people will know now to feel a bit of that thrill once lockdown eases. Yeah. Yeah, I love faces. I mean, the thing we engage with on a daily basis, it's all about people's faces. That's where you look, that's where you talk, that's where your brain is. It's all about faces, I think. That's what we relate to most as people in this world. Unless you're just an animal person and you don't like people. Trying to keep with that square motif that I had decided upon earlier here. Yeah, I like the exaggeration on this one and how the weight is redistributed. Feels pretty good. Except I give myself a pretty big problem here now. If I want to render this one, then I've got all this space here in the middle of the face and the jaw and the cheek to fill in a convincing way with like the anatomy. I just gotta just take what's there, take my cues from what's there, and just stretch it out. So there's a bit of a darker halftone here from the cheek going down to the curvature of the jaw. There's the jowls underneath the chin here. So, I mean, that's something to figure out for a bit later on. It's not for right now to solve. But just realize, though, the more you stretch and change the proportions of something, if you want to be a realistic renderer and have, paint it in a way that's very convincing, you're going to have to still fill that space up with value, with texture, with paint strokes, and you got to figure out how to do that, what to put in that large new space you've created. Because there's a huge space now between the eyes and the hair of the temple. And so I've got to bridge that gap. I've got to make that feel natural still, if I want to go with a shape like this. Oh, thanks, Bruce. Yeah, so there's, I think I'll stop there. That's my, as far as the thumbnail sketches go, I really like how this one turned out. Let's look at them all together, though. Yeah, I think they're all decent head shapes. I do see a lot of repeating patterns here. And all of my successful ones, I think I stretched the face wider, squished it down. So in that sense, I didn't branch out too much. I did on a couple of those sketches or one of those sketches where I got rid of it just because I didn't like it. And that's the thing. I learned what I liked and didn't like about his likeness, or about my exaggeration choices. And that's what the decision you'll probably come to as well, is you'll figure out what works and what doesn't. But you definitely should try lots of different shapes and directions to go in with the face, because you do really never know what's going to work or how you can make a seemingly impossible shape end up working well for you. And he's a mug, so that would be a fun way. You had to draw him like a mug. Yeah, his spirit animal is a mug. I like that, like with a coffee mug. It does have that proportion. Red says, here in the UK, I'm enjoying this YouTube piece you're doing this evening. Thanks. Yeah, Mary says, Derek Zoolander's famous pose, Blue Steel, definitely worth looking up. Yes, for sure. Yeah, I'm going to stick with this one here. I'm going to turn this middle drawing into a rough sketch here. So that'll be the last thing I do today. If y'all want to stick with me a little longer. All right. And I did shrink them down, but that's okay. It's just it's a rough sketch, or it's a really loose thumbnail sketch, so the resolution doesn't really matter. I'm going to just be tracing over it. All right, so let's do what I usually do. I just dim down the initial thumbnail sketch layer and then draw my rough sketch on top of it. But now I'm going to pay more attention to the anatomy and resolve my decisions a little more specifically. But it probably still won't have that true sense of anatomy or correct perspective yet because I haven't done the abstraction. I might get lucky, it might turn out well, but the rough sketches, I just mostly focus on refining the likeness and anatomy a little bit more. And it helps to make the photo reference a little bigger because now I can see the details of the anatomy a little more clearly. Like how the shape of the ball of the nose is in reality. And if I can use this opportunity to exaggerate a little bit more, I'll try that as well. I'll try to stick within my general template that I've created, but if I find places where I can push it a little more without losing the likeness, I'll attempt to do that. Like these lips are getting pushed out just ever so slightly. Not much. Oh no, I'm fine. You don't need to add that. I'm good. That's why I turned on the air. We're very excited around the household here. We got our air conditioning replaced a couple days ago. It was not working. So I'm giving a little bit of thought here about how I'm plotting out some of the shadows. It's called shadow mapping, where I'm not necessarily filling in all the shadows just yet, but it's just part of my rendering technique where I will draw out the borders and the edges of the shadows because they help describe the forms three-dimensionally. The shadows are super important, and it makes it a lot easier on the artist when you have a lot of strong shadows in the reference photo. If you have a photo that's very flatly lit, like if it's been taken with a flash, those are notoriously bad to work from because they get rid of all the subtle shadows and halftones on the face, and it makes your job a lot harder to make a convincing three-dimensional looking drawing. See that other eye on the right's a little too high up on my thumbnail sketch, so I'm going to drop that down a little bit. Thank you, Gustavo. His eyebrows are almost completely invisible on the outside, on the after the tail of the eyebrows, the what's it called, the outer edges. Just very blonde and light and wispy. I'm going to try to figure out a little bit of the hair here too, the hair strokes. I think because the way he does his comb over is a little unusual. He's got hair going one direction, and then he combs the hair back over on top of it in a perpendicular direction. So his hair has sort of natural cross-hatching strokes. A lot of people used to think it's a toupee, but it's not. It's just a really elaborate comb over, probably mixed with some hair transplant, is what I'm thinking, where they take some hair from the back of your head and put it on the front. Because if you ever see his hair being blown in the wind, it's like almost completely bald in the backside, and that's usually where they get the donor hair from. But then he tries to make the most out of it by double combing it over, and it's like really, really long. It's like a swirl of hair. And really distinctive way of brushing his hair on the sides too. There's not like any hair I've ever seen on any human in my life. Although he's bordering on a slight flock of seagulls, sort of homage here, if it were just a little bit more bold. And I don't know if you can tell, he's got a bit of a sort of a layer of fat hanging over his collar. I'll just make that a little more obvious because it's fun. It's fun to do. It's not really hanging out the back of his hair, the back of his neck, but his hair is sort of covering up the collar anyway. So that's what that shape is there. Butch says, with that neck fat, a bullfrog would be a good spirit animal. Yeah, definitely. I think I was unconsciously doing that in my original Trump from like 10 or 12 years ago. That has that kind of quality. But yeah, I don't think I consciously did that at the time. It just kind of makes me think of that now when I look at it. I usually represent soft edges with sort of these short, sort of hairy strokes because there's certain areas where you want to, when you're mapping out the shadows, you want a hard edge versus a soft edge. And to me, that's where I'm mapping out eventually going to be doing a soft edge. And then a little bit of the indication of the cheekbone here. Because despite his, the mass of his face and the fat in the lower part, you can still see a bit of his cheekbone, especially in certain lighting situations. Okay, you know what? And I have maybe 5 or 10 more minutes here. What I'll do is just do some light shading with my charcoal brush. It's a little brush that I made to try to mimic the look of charcoal on rough paper. I'll start with an overall tone. And just tone over the whole thing. I like laying down a starting value or starting tone just to kind of start in the middle, and that way I'm not battling the white of the canvas half the time. And I'm just going to start with really broad shading strokes here, not be too careful. I'm just going to, since it's digital, I can be a little sloppy, and I'll clean it up as I go. If I were working with real charcoal on paper, though, I would definitely be a little bit more careful, because painting or shading over a certain area or shading too darkly is not as easy to get around or to repair. Let's see. Shiny says another spirit animal which would suit him is a dairy whipped ice cream cone, or whatever you call them. Soft serve. Yeah. Bruce says the next, not to get ahead court, but the next step, would you take it to the Riley abstraction? Yeah. After I do this, this is basically the rough sketch, which I just happen to be shading because I want it to, bring it up to some level of finish for you guys. I might not always shade a rough sketch, but if I like the drawing, I will, just because I like to have a nice rough sketch drawing laying around. I would definitely do an abstraction over this to try to find and fix any errors. And then once that's done and successful, I would then do a tracing of the abstraction to do a final drawing, a final rendering, before moving on to a painting. However, if I feel strong enough and I really like the this rough sketch, I do sometimes skip the abstraction stage. I don't always do it. It's just one of those things I do if I'm not confident that I've done it correctly. If I want to make sure that the face is more structurally sound, I will run an abstraction over it to try to correct it, or to see if there's any errors that could be fixed. Flipping it backwards and forwards, left to right, also helps, as you probably already know. Coming back to it with a fresh eye, usually the next day, will also be a good gauge, because you tend to forget what you did, and you look at it with fresh eyes the next day. And if you still like it the second day, then it's probably a good indication that you can take it to a painting. Let's see here. Red asks, have you ever been commissioned to draw a caricature of someone who had, say, a prominent facial birthmark or scar and exaggerated it, or been more subtle with it? Not necessarily in a commission that I can think of, but definitely in the live party situation, I've had to draw people, with an injury or perhaps something from birth that was, a little different. And you got to include them, for sure. You don't have to make fun of them. You don't have to make them bigger or more prominent, unless they're constantly joking about it with you, like, oh man, be sure you draw my eyes crossed like they really are, and like, okay. you gauge the customer to see how comfortable you think they are with it. Because I'm not out there to make people feel bad about themselves, but they realize what they look like. They've lived with their birthmark or whatever for their whole life. And there are other situations too where it's a little more delicate, like maybe you have a toddler with Down syndrome or something where they look definitely different. They're adorable and cute and so sweet, and but you got to draw them as they are, otherwise the parents will not recognize them, and you got to be true to who they are. If you try to quote unquote fix them, that's to me a little insulting to that person and their struggles that they've gone through, because they've come to peace, or maybe they haven't, I don't know, but they are who they are, and to assume that you can fix them by not drawing the thing that makes them very different and unique is diminishes their personhood a little bit. So just the amount of which you draw attention to those kinds of things is up to you. But yeah, you can always draw them, I think, in most situations, whether it's a birthmark or a particular way they look that's different from the average. You definitely got to honor that, but you don't have to go crazy on it. Sovik says, you're late today, missed the early stages. That's okay, you can do the replay as soon as it's finished streaming. Or actually, you might be able to rewind it live, actually, as I'm doing it. You can still probably rewind it and get to the beginning, but whatever. It's midnight here in Bangladesh, 2:30 now. Wow, thanks for staying up late and watching, Sovik. I will try to vary my live stream times more in the future too, to give people in different parts of the world a chance to watch it live without it being so inconvenient. So it might be more inconvenient for people in the US, like maybe I'll do one really late here so that it's during the daytime somewhere else. Just because it's good to try to think about people around the world. So I'm getting a little more specific in my shading now and being a little more careful. Initially I was very broad in all my strokes and a little sloppy. Just trying to bring out some of the lighter forms and just going back and forth now between light and dark. Sovik says, very eager to see you working with traditional mediums like ink or colors. Yeah, I did an actual ink drawing a couple weeks ago of Harrison Ford. It's still up on my YouTube if you didn't catch that. But yeah, I'll try to do some more traditional materials in the future. It's just easier to do the setup digitally than it is to set everything up for traditional materials on the desk. But I have the capability, so I definitely will. Okay, so we're getting about that time, I think. Here, let's pull back and take a look at what I got. Yeah, it's a good start, I think. Definitely needs some refinement. I might take some different brushes to it and flesh it out a little bit more. The charcoal brush I got here is pretty good for just a good pass over, but a once over. But it is a little grainy and hard to get some of the effects I might want otherwise. Let's see if there's any last questions here. No, guess not. So yeah, so that'll be it for this week here, or for today. Hopefully I'll get a chance to do something again for you real soon. Look for announcements on my Instagram and on my Court Jones Facebook page. Be sure to follow me there if you haven't already. And I will see you guys next time. Thanks.